brother's wife, and his brother died within 6 months of his own death. He died not knowing whether he was ever going to have an impact on anybody whatsoever, but if he had summed up his life's experience in order to figure out if he was going to do anything of value, the answer would have been no. You're dying uselessly. Your life was useless. And that's a tragedy. Well, his brother's sister was a terrific publicist, and she went out and got attention for his work.
But before we ask some people to talk,
right.
I was thinking earlier today, when I was a young man, somebody who had a big influence on me was Henry Miller.
Right.
Not so much the books about sex, which were fine and exciting, but Henry Miller wrote all these books talking about all of these independent artists that he knew, his friends, he thought were wonderful, these painters, these writers, and who enriched his life,
right,
who made him want to live and made him vibrant. None of these people ever made it.
I'll tell you one story about the bees before we open it up to the audience. And that is that, okay, 95% of the bees in a beehive are nice, conformist, forager bees. They do what they're supposed to do. They go out and do their job every day. They go to the flower patch everybody knows about, the popular flower patch everybody else is going to, and they come back with pollen. And if they are lucky, the unloader bees, there's a little unloading dock in the hive. And unloader bees are the ones who pull all this pollen that they've gathered and off of them in order to feed it into the inside of the hive and stick their tongues down the throat of you who are an incoming bee in order to see if you've got any valuable liquids inside of you, and they pack that stuff away. Now when you arrive at the lip of the hive and you are carrying something that is urgently needed in the hive, pollen, the unloaders rush over to you as if they are groupies surrounding a rock star. And you feel great. How do we know you feel great? Because you operate with energy. Because you're alert and you go back out to that flower patch as quickly as you can, and you bumble through 100 flowers and pick up all the pollen and come back again with eagerness. And if you don't get any attention when you come back to the lip of the hive, if nobody pays attention to you whatsoever, you go into the equivalent of clinical depression. How do we know? Because you work more slowly and your body temperature goes down. And eventually, if you've been doing this long enough, that is, if you've been going out and coming back empty-handed or coming back with something the hive doesn't need, and you get no attention over and over and over again, you get the message. And you stop going out to the flower patches, and you crawl with the very little energy you have back into the hive, and you are there torpid and listless, except you need excitement. Something to perk you up. You need entertainment. And there are entertainers. Well, who are the entertainers? The entertainers, again, 95% of the bees are conformists. 5% of the bees are bohemians. And the 5% of the bees who are bohemians have been going out doing something that looks so ridiculously self-indulgent, such a waste of time and energy, that it's ridiculous. They go out on little 18-mile trips going nowhere. And there are 5% of the hive. That's a lot of bees. That's 1,000 bees. And some of those 1,000 bees find something they think could be of value to the hive. And they come back and they dance their message. Their message says, this is what I found, this is where it is, this is what I think its value is. But there are 5 competitors at least competing in the hive. Now you and I, and you've come back empty-handed. Nobody's paid attention to you for a full day, a full work day. You finally crawled into the hive and are ready to die. Except you're still alive enough to look for something to perk you up. And it turns out there are 5 bees dancing their little tails off with the messages of what they found. So you crawl over to the bees who are dancing the messages. Now, eventually, a bee, if its message is powerful enough, will begin to perk you up. And it will perk you up so much it will convince you that this might be something of value. That bee might be onto something. And if that bee gets that message across to you, you go out and check what she says. You go out to the patch that she's advertising. And if you're excited about it, you come back and you do a little dance too. Well, one of the 5 bees who gets the most backup dancers wins. And eventually, the 95% of the bees who do what everybody else does all go off to the flower patch advertised by this useless bohemian, wasting time and energy in the manner of Ahmad Zahavi, and demonstrating this is a consumer's cosmos that wastes, wastes, wastes in order to find what's next and what's important. Now, the big question is, what happens to the 4 bees who lose? What happens to the 200 bees who didn't even get to dance? Without them, the search engine wouldn't work. And the hive would die somewhere in the middle of winter not having the 20 kilograms of honey, the 45 pounds of honey it needs to make it through the winter. Is nature cruel and vicious? Yes. Does she use us and dispose of us the way she disposes of sperm? And by the way, every woman in this room, in embryonic phase, has 6,000 oocytes, immature ova. So if you have 3 kids, think of the waste. Think of the waste. It's appalling. And every one of those things is alive in its own way. And its life is disposed of so casually it's ridiculous. Because we are the cosmos with consciousness, because we are the cosmos with a moral sensibility, I think it's our job to stop that ridiculous waste and that agony. But you feel the value of the agony for creativity, and we're both right.
This is just a tiny little fragment of a myriad number of subjects that in this book Howard is able to relate to his central exploratory field. I'm sure there must be some people out there who would love to ask Howard some questions, no?
Well, actually, we have been very clever, and we planted somebody, but we don't need to, because there's a real human with questions.
So I guess when we're loading the ark, we better make sure we bring some troubadours and comedians and artists.
Absolutely.
So let's get back to the cosmos real quick, Howard. I've heard you in a radio interview talk about things like mass extinction events, because the cosmos doesn't look at, let's say, creation, destruction, sustainability. It's just one big cycle of transformation.
Right.
So aren't we heading towards one of those MSEs right now, and it's really beyond our control?
Yes, but the reason is a little uncharacteristic. We may or may not have a man-made crisis on our hands. We may or may not have a crisis of carbon gases on our hands. We may or may not have a global warming crisis on our hands. That is impossible for us to say, because the issue is so politicized that it's not science anymore. One thing we can say for certain is there have been 142 mass extinctions since life has arisen on this planet. And most of those mass extinctions have come because of massive climate changes. Some of those climate changes have been ice ages. Some of those climate changes have been global warmings. In the 2.5 million years since we've been human, there have been 60 global warmings, and there have been 20 global warmings and 60 glaciations, 60 ice ages. In those 20 global warmings, in most of them, the temperature went up 10 to 18 degrees in 10 years or less, which makes the global warming that we think we're in the middle of look ridiculous by comparison. What's the interpretation of all of this information? One way or the other, the temperature is going to change big time, because that's the way the cosmos operates. And the cosmos operates that way for a very simple reason. We wobble as we go around the sun, and those wobbles produce major changes in temperature every 23,000, 42,000, and 100,000 years. Plus, the cosmos, or the solar system itself, is circling around the center of the galaxy every 226 million years. And this is a trip that's worse than Frodo's trip in The Hobbit. It's got so many risks, dangers, and appalling circumstances that it's ridiculous. And every one of those things changes our climate. What is nature doing? She's proliferating as many species as possible to find as many niches as possible before the next great extinction, so that she manages to not only keep life alive, but keep it thriving and developing in new ways. So yeah, we're in for it big time. But the problem is, we humans evolved in the middle of all these ice ages and global warmings, and they were what made us clever. They gave us the challenge of overcoming them over and over and over again, inventing our way out of things. Let's redefine something in biology. A niche isn't something that's there. A niche is an opportunity to invent something. If we invent a metabolism, if we invent a way